Good morning.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey. Welcome everybody. Thanks for tuning in this morning. I actually forgot my cue there. Normally Polina is here. This isn't Polina, by
But
the way.
now,
This is Sarah.
but unfortunately, he's got to ring in.
Yeah, Sarah's kindly put her hand up to step in for today's webinar. Paulina's over in Europe having a nice holiday. Normally she does the introduction for these webinars, hence why I was a bit slow off the block there. But here we are. We're up and
Anyway,
running.
this is Patty.
I'm Paddy. Thanks for tuning in.
Now I'm trying to make up for what seems to be a bad start according to me. But that's cool.
Oh well, the best thing is we can't start again. So if the start's already happened and we're moving on. Welcome everybody. So this morning we're talking Streamtime 101. So we're actually going to start running this webinar on a monthly basis. It's essentially going to be a first stop class to help everybody, or to help newcomers to Streamtime understand exactly what's going on in Streamtime, what they can do, understanding just the high level capabilities and looking at how that's done. We'll be going through a workflow, looking at a job structure. So creating a job, planning it out, pricing it, sending a quote to a client, scheduling that in, tracking time, and then invoicing at the end. So a lot of ground to cover, and we're not going to go into too much depth in any area in particular, but we'll be talking through how we do this and why we do this as we go.
Cool. Sounds good.
Sounds good. Sarah's on our design team, so maybe she can give us some tips and pointers as to why things are working the way they are, which is always useful to know. And in general housekeeping, before we do kick off, please feel free to introduce yourselves. There's a chat bar on the right-hand side there. Let us know your name, where you're tuning in from, and maybe what your role is. Always good to see there. And if you do have any questions as we're going, just drop them in the right-hand side. And we can get back to them at the end. We'll always save about 5 minutes for questions and answers at the end of the webinar, the final stop. Cool. So I'm going to get up my... Oh, hey, Nadine. Nice to see you tuning in. I'm just going to share my screen and we can get this show on the road. Okay, so...
What's first cab off the rank, Patty?
First thing we need to know about Streamtime is about, kind of stepping back in terms of before we actually do anything, we structure everything in jobs in Streamtime. A job is kind of the center of the universe when it comes to Streamtime. It's where all of our information will live and be organized underneath. So when we're talking about time, expenses, quotes, and invoices, they're all going to need a job to belong to, and they can't exist without a job. So we can't really do much in Streamtime without a job to get started. So we're going to create a new job here. This one is going to be the 2020 season guide for the ACO. We'll create and plan this one, get it underway, and that's all we need to get the job underway. So we've got a job name and a client. I can see here that my job number is set up automatically. So I've been given a job number as we get going, and I'm being asked to add an item.
Tell me about items.
I was going to ask you to tell me about items. Yeah.
Okay, so items are anything that you would relate to a job. So if you were, say, running a job through stages, which I think is quite a usual flow for a design job like this, it might be a campaign, you might start with, say, a concepting stage, or even before that, a scoping stage. We often find customers set up scoping stage, concept, design development, and through that they'll plan the hours or the cost of that or the sell rate of that item, and then they can add the team members that they want to assign to each one. Should we start?
Let's start. And I think the other thing is really important to know about items is they're all related to time. So when our team's tracking their time, it's all going to be captured underneath these items. So let's say the first one here is going to be discover. Maybe this is the first initial kickoff phase of most of our jobs where we kind of understand the work that we're doing. We're understanding the brief of the client and the market that we're going to be going to. So how many hours we might say here, let's say we can do 50 hours of discover. And I can see this is pulled back from my my rate card, my items and expenses area at about $200 an hour. This is typically what we'll sell our discover work for. And that's giving us a total multiplied by 50 of $10,000. Now, I might add some sub-items here. This is going to be like a little checklist of more granular tasks that I can tick off.
So things like research, exploration, whatever might come in as something that is all covered by the bucket of the item discovered, if that makes sense. Then you can tick them off as you complete them, giving you a bit more of a flow through the actual doing of the task.
Exactly. And I'm going to add myself as a team member here and Sarah. Let's say we're kicking off this research phase. Great. And let's lock that one down. I'm going to click out to save that one down. We can see these things are now locked in, which is great. I'm going to add another item here. Maybe this is going to be concept development. And we'll spend maybe 40 hours doing this. Again, 180 is coming here. But let's say within this project, we might prefer to work with a fixed fee. We understand that different agencies do work with different pricing models. There are lots of benefits and different ways of doing this. Fixed fee is certainly another. So we're going to plan to do 40 works, and that's acting as an internal budget, a bit of a guide for us and our team when it comes to how many hours we're budgeting towards this concept development phase. But let's say, regardless of all the work that we do, we're actually going to sell this piece of work out, that concept development. Our concepts are worth about $10,000, and there's a bit of IP included in that too. So we're going to add these in here. Again, Patty and Sarah, let's just take this project on there. So again, setting that one up, and maybe I'll put this one into pause at the moment. Putting it into pause just means that it's not quite ready to be worked on yet. I am going to come and add some dates in a little bit too. We'll do that from the schedule, but you can do that here. Essentially, we're just saying that this one isn't ready to be worked on yet, whereas this one that's in play, Patty and Sarah will actually be able to actively work on that today if they wanted to.
Say for this third item, Patty, if I wanted to allocate a certain amount of time for, say, a creative director who might have a higher hourly rate than for a junior designer or a mid-weight designer, would I be able to do that here?
Yeah, absolutely. So this one is going to be our design phase. Again, let's say maybe there will be about 60 hours of work, although we do want to skew this across the different weights of workers in our company. So again, Sarah, you're far more experienced than I am. However, your work does get sold out at a much higher rate. So I'm going to budget 20 hours for yourself, and I'm only a junior designer. I'm going to do 40 hours here, a bit more heavy lifting, but I'm also slower and a bit less effective than you. I can actually click down here and toggle open these rate cells next to each team member. And what you can see there is that these are populating our team members' hourly sell rates. Sorry, your default rate is $300 per hour. I am only at $250. At this point, you can even change these. So let's say on this particular project, Patty's work's only getting sold at $200. I'd be cautious of doing this because those figures are getting pulled from the back end where we'll have that sell rate, which is what we're seeing here, set up, but also our cost rate. And the danger with amending these on the job, especially if you're reducing them, is that you're not actually getting any visibility of that cost rate. And it could mean that in this instance, unless you already know your cost rates off by heart and you know that we're not actually dipping below here, that 200 could well be dropping below my cost rate, which means that that piece of work, design work, is actually not going to be entirely profitable if we do that. But knowing that we can update these figures here on a job-by-job instance where applicable, just understanding that flexibility is what we're trying to communicate here. So I'll put that one into pause as well.
Cool.
So before we take this one any further, I've just set up this job at a preliminary kind of level, and I want to add some labels here. Now, can you tell me a bit about labels? What might a label be used for?
Labels are really flexible. So they're kind of like tags on jobs. Yep. You can also put labels on other parts of the product like quotes and things like that. But what they're useful for is to kind of say, maybe this is at a stage where we're just quoting and it hasn't been signed off by client. You might have your designer log in and see it, but they're not really meant to be working on it, or they're only meant to be doing that first stage, and then seeing the label helps doing that. It also helps to sort and filter later on in the jobs list, where you can report by, okay, how many I just want to see what the quoted jobs are this month. You might have another label that says, I've invoiced. It's a print job. I've invoiced half of it.
Yeah.
It's a job that Patty's working on. You could use them for anything, which is why they're so flexible and really useful, because as we know, it seems like everyone's got their own process, and having labels allows the system to sort of flex with whatever studio process you might have in play.
They're essentially a customizable field that you can query your jobs by and any information across those jobs by. So they're really useful when it comes to reporting, but also for identifying things about that job that are handy to know. And they are nice and lightweight, so you can just go in and add them as you like. Cool. So we're coming up to our create button, and we're going to hit create quote because we've got all those items planned. Actually, there's one thing we'll add before we add a quote, and that's going to be an expense. We're going to need some photography done for this guide, so let's add a photographer in here. Maybe we're going to need them for 3 days worth of work, and their daily rate is $8.50. Now, on all of our expenses, we like to put a little bit of a markup, so 15% here, which will then sell on to the client. So I'm accounting for this photographer. I've got 3, which is the quantity, and that's the multiplying their daily rate of $850 with that 15% markup, giving us this total of almost $3,000, $2,932.50. Great. If there were any other information or details that I wanted to include here, I could add a description, even add labels to expenses, indicate the date on which we needed this photographer or which we paid that expense, and add the supplier details, so the name of that photographer. Could also convert this to a purchase order and integrate it with Xero, but we don't need to worry about that now. We're just accounting for this lightweight cost. I can see that this is being absorbed here too. Now, I'm going to create a quote. And do you want to just run me through what's happening on this quote, Sarah?
Sure. So when you press create quote, it'll automatically bring through all those items. You'll see the total quantity.
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
I stole the mouse.
You'll see the total quantities of each item. You'll see the sell rates of the totals for the items that you've set up, and you'll see the sell rate of the photography expense. And then that means it's pretty quick. You just click create quote and you get to this screen. But at this stage, you can customize what you want to show on the quote that you'll send to the client. So you might not want them to see certain things. You can remove the quantities. They might be just for your internal tracking purposes. You might want to add the team on the job. You might want to show that this is your rack rate, but that you're giving them a discount for however much they're entitled to, which always is useful. If you want a discount, it's always good practice to show what you would be charging at 100% so that they know that there's a discount going forward. And you can add an introduction, which I think is over here. So you can kind of type out, as agreed on the phone or as discussed in the meeting, here's the quote for the job, XYZ.
Now, Sarah, let's say I would prefer not to indicate to my client that we're using a photographer and that might be a third-party expense which is being marked up. Rather, it would be a much easier conversation if I just integrated that into one of these other line items, like the design phase, for example.
Sure.
Could I do that?
You could. On the quote, you'll see these little grabbers on each of the items or the expenses. And what you can do is merge them by clicking them, dragging and dropping them. You'll get that little tip that says merge items. And you'll see that is automatically included in the cost, and that expense is in the description. Now you can edit this, you can remove it, you can write something like includes photography, and then you can change the dollar amount if you wanted to as well. But we do recommend that you do that previous on the expenses page so that everything kind of lines up and you don't have figures that appear on your quote that aren't kind of reflected on the job plan. You can also add different kinds of tax depending on where the job's being held. I won't go into too much detail with that, but
oh, what do you mean? That's the most fun topic of all. Maybe next week we'll just run a tax.
I think that's Streamtime 102.
102, yeah. Or like 7004 or something like that. Okie dokie. So thank you from the side, Andy. Cool. We're trying to keep that mouse movement down. All right, so we're sending this one to the client. I can do this straight from Streamtime, add as many recipients as we want. I can also add a message here. So, hi, here's your quote. Thanks. Great. Sending it from Streamtime electronically. The quote will get marked as sent. The client will get an email. Sarah from Streamtime has just sent you a quote. Click here to view it. They'll get taken to an online portal. And it looks pretty similar to this, just without as much functionality. But they can approve it, decline it, and save it as PDF directly from there.
What happens when you approve it, Paddy?
When we approve the quote, and the approval of the quote is a very, very important part of this process, because when we approve a quote, we get a budget for the job. Streamtime recognizes that our client has said yes to this quote. We therefore have a budget which has been agreed to formally, and therefore this budget is actually hard coded into the system here. So the only way to change that is by editing the quote, which will break this budget figure, or by generating a new quote and having that approved. And what that's going to do is just accumulate those approved quote figures together. But the really important thing about having a budget here is that it gives us a bit of a figure of truth around the job. Think of it as a North Star in terms of what you're aiming towards. That total next to it is showing you the current total running costs of the job, but at their sell rate. So we're looking at all of these figures and we're seeing them in the sell rate here. We try to keep it in that 1 unit for you, at least at this point, just so it all makes sense together. But what that's showing you is essentially your progress. And the second that that total flicks above the budget, it'll turn red. And at that point, you probably want to stop working on the project or get some more scope quoted, because you're going to run over and become an unprofitable business.
Yeah. And we all know that scope changes during a project quite frequently. So what you can do is add a new item for that additional scope, get another quote, approve that, and then your budget figure will update and might turn from red back into black. But ideally it doesn't go red in the first place, and you have a bit more visibility on getting that always ahead of where you're tracking. Anyway.
Got there. Nice.
Yeah.
Sweet. All right.
That's the end of the sentence.
This, you sure about that?
Cool.
Great. So we've had that quote approved. We've got a budget. Now it's time to actually get some work planned in for the team.
Cool.
So we're going to click through there to the schedule.
What did you just do? That was really quick.
Sorry, I did jump back there. I am going to just hit this back button and do that a little bit slower and explain what I did. Let's go through to the schedule. And there's this button that lives on each item that says View Schedule. It lives right next to those dates. And as I said before, you can add these start and end dates to the item here. I personally prefer to do it from the schedule. I find the experience a bit nicer, a bit more intuitive, because you see, I just get this flag here. I actually prefer this more visual just view that I'm provided. A visual view, can you say that? I'm not sure.
I think that's a tautology.
Yeah. Who wanted an English lesson?
Sorry.
Cool. Great. So by just dropping in these due dates when we're expecting these phases to be delivered, and then dropping a start date in between, I'm able to give Streamtime a bit of context around this work, which is going to provide, which is going to prove really useful for my team. And as you can see, I can just scan across here and just drop in these dates really cleanly and easily. I've just clicked to open those other phases because that's currently when we expect them to be delivered. I can unfold this Discover phase. And right now, what I'm actually going to do is create some work to be done. Now, this week looks a bit full for both Patty and Sarah. Is
that the grey that you're seeing there?
Exactly, yeah. So I've got my team members here. I need 50 hours of work to be done by these two, but because these dark grey boxes are appearing, that's telling me that if I try and book in time here, Patty and Sarah are going to be overworked. And you can see the second I do that, I'm getting a red box. That box is turning red, and that's just a heat map simply indicating that you're overbooking that team member. And so we're going to avoid that.
And those hatched squares as well, that's showing it's a non-work day. It's a weekend in this instance.
Yep.
But if you had part-time workers, you could also change their working days.
Absolutely, exactly. Cool. And so what I can do is just click and drag across the grid here to add these time entries. Now we're going to need quite a few because we're going to need 25 hours by each team member done in the next week, essentially, if we're sharing this evenly. And you can see as I drag across, I'm actually looking to the left next to the word Discover there, which is telling me currently I've scheduled in 25 hours out of the 50 which we've planned between these two guys. And I can see that at this point, Patty will be at about 66% capacity with all of that work, 5 hours a day for 5 days. So he'll have a few hours left over to get some other things done, but that's going to pretty much consume me next week. I can do the exact same thing for Sarah here, just by clicking and dragging across, which is really easy. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to navigate to another area of the schedule. If you look at the top here, we're currently in the jobs schedule, but we're going to click across to the to-do schedule, and this is going to present this timeline in a slightly different way. Can you tell us what we're looking at here?
Sure. So switching from the jobs schedule to the to-do, shows you those tasks in a much more granular format. So if you can see, I'm up there, and Patty, and those dates that we've just painted in, that time that we've painted in on that job has appeared on our to-do schedule. This is a really good view for being able to see multiple people at once and the exact tasks that they're working on. And you can also drag and drop these tasks around. So say, okay, I have been scheduled for 5 hours per day next week, but I actually want to spend all of my time on Monday on it because on Tuesday I've got a couple of meetings that I haven't yet put in my to-do schedule. I can just drag that up to cover up 8 and drag the other one down. And we know then that we still hit the right amount of hours. And that just gives us flexibility. On the scheduled jobs view shows us kind of the time period in which we need to get the work done and roughly when we could be doing it. And then when we're here, we can plan out our days and our weeks in a much more granular fashion. What else can you do from this screen?
Yeah, this screen is really useful for members of the team who are finding themselves managing the team, essentially resourcing and traffic managing. The reason for that is because you do get this bird's eye view of the schedule. As you said, Sarah, you can move these tasks around, not just within one team member's to-do screen, which is their weekly plan, and we'll look at that in a second, but amongst other team members as well. So I've actually got this schedule currently filtered, and I'm going to remove myself from here just so we can see what else is going on. And it looks like not much is happening with Michael and Polly next week. But let's say, for instance, that we come in next Monday and Sarah is actually sick and can't get up on that discovery work. Now, I know Polly is actually able to jump in and kind of cover that work for her. So and that's a high priority. We need that done by Friday. So I can just pick up these tasks and drop that over to Paulina's to-do screen. Now, in the instance that we might need to get them both working on it, I could actually duplicate this as well. So let's say we want to keep Sarah working on this, but Polly needs to jump in and give her a hand. I can hold down Alt Option and click and drag those tasks there to duplicate them, which is really useful when it comes to resourcing and having multiple people working on one thing at a time.
So you had something really specific that you wanted to be done on that Monday, on that item, and you wanted to tell Polly why she's been allocated this task because I'm sick or something's happened. You could open up that task and you would be able to leave that note.
Sure can. So, hi Polly, Sarah's not feeling 100%. Can you please jump on this as we're pushing the deadline? Thanks. So leaving a nice note there means that it'll be surfaced in Paulina's to-do screen, and we'll start talking about the to-do screen because we're about to open it up. But you can see here we've actually surfaced that note as the priority in the hierarchy. We're telling Polly that that's the most important thing she needs to know is whatever we've included in that note. So she's going to see that, and that will be the first thing she's drawn to.
Cool.
So moving to Sarah's to-do screen, I can jump in, and what we've got here is Sarah's list of tasks. So it's essentially what we were just looking at the schedule, just at a much closer level. Now, this is where Sarah will live, manage her work, and track her time.
I love this screen. It's my favorite.
Your favorite screen? Is it the colors?
It's the colors. It's just really usable, and it gives me a week view. I can change what I've done. I can see what I've clearly done, and the way it's been designed means that it also is useful for the other side of the business. For example, like an account manager who's tracking time. So on the one hand, for the designer or for the person who's got the to-do screen open, it's useful to show what tasks have been done and working through those tasks. But on the other side, once those tasks are marked as done, the hours get logged onto the job.
Right. So this is the one big point of difference with Streamtime compared to other project management tools. When we were building the new Streamtime, we found that people hate doing timesheets, and so taking the pain out of that process was something we were really interested in. And the solution we came to, the one that we arrived at, was this to-do screen. It's a smart to-do list that essentially tracks time. As we already know from that previous screen, these tasks do have time associated with them. So as I hover, I can see the time indicated as we were doing on the previous page. I can actually click and drag the edges of these boxes to allocate different amounts of time to them, and working to this gray line across the top of my screen as a bit of a guide for my 8-hour day. Now, when it comes to logging these tasks, it's really easy to do, meaning there's no excuse for your team really not tracking their time. First of all, in this instance, Sarah had a weekly plan. She obviously hasn't tracked her time on Monday and Tuesday. That's all right, it happens. Maybe you were just on the phone until 6 o'clock and you had to leave the office, pick up your daughter from school. So in hindsight, Sarah can really easily log these tasks just by clicking that drop arrow below, pushing them all down there. Again, really easy for the designer to do, really useful for the business owner to have that time actually logged. Now, looking at today, we can pick these up one by one, rearrange them as we know, and we'll pull up items from our item list on the right-hand side, which is showing us the work that we're currently assigned to, with a bit of hierarchy around when things are due, because we've given Streamtime the information on those due dates too. Now, I am going to take an example, and let's say that we were able to get a head start on that season guide. Let's say you actually did a little bit of that discovery work today. Let's say in this instance, I can see these sub items pulling through here. Let's say we got 3 hours of research done today. I can select that, and that's going to tell the job manager, the job owner, exactly what I worked on. And so I'm logging that time so that we can head back to the job.
Oh, stop. We're getting some messages saying that the screen has frozen.
Okay.
Okay.
Let me just stop sharing it, and I'll share it one more time. Thanks for pointing that out, everybody.
Yeah.
Well spotted.
Just saw some. See if that's working again.
Okay, how is that screen looking, everybody? Is it moving for you now? That's better.
All
Great,
right.
awesome.
So should we, let's go back
I'll just jump back to
yeah.
your to-do screen.
Cool.
So I'll just recreate that last task. I'll delete this one, and I probably didn't need to delete it. I'm going to add a new task here for that 2020 season guide. It is, yeah.
It's more accurate. You need to keep things accurate.
Exactly.
Cool.
Great. So I've just come in here to add a new task for this ACO season guide, because we were able to get started on it this week, although we thought we wouldn't be able to do it until next week. And so I'm saying there's 3 hours of research that we were able to work on today. I can see these sub items being pulled through here that we had set up. And that's exactly what we were working on. This has been created here, and we're going to log this now. Great. Now I can quickly jump back to the job. You see when I hover over that job name on the task, it turns a lighter shade of gray, meaning it's a clickable link. So I can click through that shortcut and come back to the job. Now, what we can see is that this job is actually proving to start to get underway. 3 hours starting
That's the time
to
that we've just logged.
Exactly. I can see this in a dollar figure when it comes to use planned. And do you just want to explain what this graph is showing me now,
Yeah.
Sarah?
So you may have noticed at the beginning when we started planning the job that graph was empty. That's because it kind of needs the data that we pulled into each of the items to work. What you'll see is this white, the white kind of triangle shows all the time that we've planned on each of those items up to those different dates. So first step of that was planning 50 hours. The second step was when Patty went into the schedule and added the dates in. So we want to do those 50 hours in between those dates. And that's reflected in this burn up chart as the white kind of thing in the background. Now, as those hours are used, they'll come up as blue. And then when you hover over where we see blue and white, you'll see a tooltip showing you, okay, we've used 3 hours, which is 10 hours under what we should have used if we average out the time in that time, the planned time in that time period. So it's just to give you a bit of a snapshot of how your job is going. You ideally want to keep your blue under your white because that means a more profitable job. If it starts going over, you know that you can kind of average out across the time. And as you plan tasks ahead of time, which is what we did in the schedule before with both me and Polly, you'll see that those hours are shown as a dotted line, which means they're planned to do tasks, but they haven't yet been logged as done. So you can, in the perfect world, if you were able to schedule everything, you would see this dotted line kind of tracking along your white line, and ideally the blue kind of just tracks with what you've planned. But what's good about the other parts of the program, like the to-do schedules, that you can flex and change as you go, which we know is really common across design jobs.
So this is a visual way of seeing that job progress. This is showing us the entire job together. Now, we do pull this through at an item level as well. Clicking open our team members, I can see that because we did create that task for Paulina, she's now been pulled into this item.
Cool.
And Sarah's tracked 3 hours there, which is awesome. So as we go, that'll continue to fill up. In a second, we'll take a quick look at I'll show you now. We'll take a look at a job that's got a bit more information on it, so you can see what it looks like when lots more time has been tracked, and some things have been going over. So this is a much longer project. We can see that slowly burning up there, a bit happening at the top here. And as I scroll down, we can see we've got some completed phases. In this instance, Danielle tracked over that time. We've turned that figure red as an indication of where things were blown over budget. But at the item level, we were still underneath, which is fine. So giving you a quick snapshot there in terms of how that's looking with a bit more data.
Should we cover the create button just very briefly, because I know we're running
Let's do it, and we'll use it as a segue to complete the last task on this job.
Cool.
So looking at the create button, what's this useful for?
This is useful for a number of things. Like some of the things in the create menu you can do on the job down below, say for example creating an item or an expense, but you can create to-dos from this screen, which is really useful. So you can start planning if you don't want to move away from this screen. You can obviously add the expenses, purchase orders, quotes, invoice, which is the last step I think Patty's getting to.
Yeah, I was going to drop that from, yeah.
Invoicing works pretty much as we were planning on getting into invoicing, but we have run out of time. So it works the same way as a quote, really.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And a job cost report, which gives you just sort of a snapshot of how your job is going at that point in time as a downloadable PDF. But you can also add a new job from here, duplicate a job, archive this job if it's been completed and you don't want to see it in your jobs list anymore, or you can delete the job. But it's just kind of a quick way to do all those actions if you want to find a place to do all the things that you can
possibly do on a job. Totally. Nice one.
Cool.
Great. Well, in terms of what we wanted to show you guys today, that's it. That's the first thing you need to know about Streamtime 101. We've planned a job. We've quoted it. We've had some time tracked against it. We've scheduled in, and we know how we can review that job progress. There's a whole lot more to know about Streamtime, but hopefully you've got plenty there to sit and digest with at the moment to go and get started. If you have any questions around other functionality, next steps, what you want to learn, be sure to just drop us a message. The easiest way to do that is using the help button in your sidebar menu.
Hi, Patty.
Hello. Opening that up will let you start a new conversation with us. We're on the other end of that, so you can just chat. You can go watch some previous webinars as well. So we run these webinars on a weekly basis. There's a whole bunch of them up already. So if you don't want to have to wait for next week to keep learning, by all means, go and learn yourself. That's great. We encourage that. Search our knowledge base for articles or book in a session. If you want to get us on the phone, we can do that too. We'll do a screen share and all of that jazz. But cool. In the meantime, we'll leave you to it. Have a great Wednesday, and thanks for tuning in.
Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah.
Oh, you're welcome.